Welcome to the Campfire Tales series by the Shadow Files podcast. Join us as we take a deep dive into some spooky, scary, and very real stories. This story is called Phone Calls from the Dead. So a brief background. I work for a company that answers phones and takes messages for businesses when they are closed, out for lunch, or after hours. We answer for a variety of companies in different fields, including funeral homes. This situation has happened twice that I can think of, where I've answered the call myself, and a few other times when other people have answered. So, the first time this happened, I took a message from a lady whose mother had passed away recently. The body was already picked up and dressed at the funeral parlour. Visitation was scheduled for the following day. She calls and is weepy and asks if her mother's phone is still in her jacket pocket because they just got a phone call from that number. I end up dispatching the call, calling the director to deliver the message verbally. He says that he'll call her, but the body is in the casket and the casket is closed. Waiting in the parlour, I say, "Wow, weird." He just chuckles and says, "This kind of thing happens more often than you would think." It's been a year or more since that call, and I just yesterday got another call very similar from another funeral home. And the other people that I work with have had the same types of stories. I just wanted to get some outside opinions because it's interesting and creepy at the same time.
The ghost of the Stanley Hotel. The Stanley Hotel in Estes Park, Colorado, has been around for more than 100 years and was built as a posh getaway for the wealthy, seeking solitude in the mountains. As the years passed, however, occupancy declined, and by the 1970s, the Grand Hotel had fallen into despair. It was around that time that famed author Stephen King spent the night there and was inspired to write the book The Shining. The book and blockbuster film helped return the Stanley to its former glory. Now, guests comes in droves to see the hotel that inspired one of the scariest horror movies of all time. Given its history, it should come as no surprise that many visitors report strange happenings. Aware of the ghostly rumors, Texas resident Henry Yao booked a last-minute getaway in April of 2016 to check it out. After arriving, Yao had dinner, then wandered around the Stanley to take photos. Stopping at the staircase, he waited for people to clear the area, then took a picture, thinking nothing of it. Later that night, however, Yao fell seriously ill. Quote, "I felt really sick. I had the shivers. I was like, something's really wrong." End of quote. He tells, today, his companion suggested he go to the emergency room, but Yao refused. On the trip home, Yao began swiping through the photos he'd taken when he discovered what he said was really strange image of someone standing on the stairs. Except no one had been there. The next day, he posted the photo on Instagram, half joking that he'd captured a ghost, and the world took notice. Almost overnight, Yao found himself in the limelight with his ghost picture warranting attention from global media outlets and paranormal experts who wanted to examine the photo. Some experts say that there's two ghosts, and other people said that the reason I got sick is because the ghost was trying to materialize, taking energy out of me. There's so many theories about this. What does Yao think? I have no idea, he says with a laugh. So once I saw the Stanley Hotel, I was like, you know what? I know that the Stanley is infamous.
Yes.
It's very well known.
Yes.
And since we're trying this story, Campfire Tales, why not start off with something that is already well known?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's because we both have a lot of experiences within the paranormal. We do our own investigations. We are out there. We see things. But the story is okay.
This is the thing about stories like that. You just never know where it's going to take you. Now, the Stanley Hotel is definitely a place I want to investigate, purely because of the history, and I think so many things have been shot there over the years. And if you've ever watched that scene in that film Ready Player One where they end up in the Stanley Hotel, I think it's something that every paranormal investigator has to experience at least once, and it's definitely on my bucket list.
The Stanley Hotel is definitely in my bucket list.
Yeah.
Dare I say that I haven't brought it up to Vanessa. I've always long said that my honeymoon, I would love it to be in the Stanley Hotel.
That would be awesome. That would be awesome.
But now, we kind of want to go out of the States, and we've actually spoken about even getting married in a haunted castle.
Well, that's probably going to mean you got to go to the UK. I definitely think that is something that we would have to try and make happen, because I could take you to a lot of places through the UK. I grew up there, don't you know? Yeah, we've been planning on going there for a while, and we're talking about making a full trip of it and then heading over to sort of Norway and try and see the Northern Lights and stuff. While we're talking, what are your thoughts on phone calls from the dead?
Well, it is very interesting just because, I've seen certain, well, not myself, as I fall through the wormhole of YouTube, you come across certain things. And unfortunately, you don't really hear it yourself. You just got to go by other people's experience. But the thought process behind it is very interesting. I've heard stories of people hearing the phone ring, picking it up. You hear crackling, like white noise status for a little bit. And as you say, hello, hello. And then all of a sudden, like behind the white noise, you hear a deceased loved one's voice come through.
They're not always loved ones as well. I actually did a episode very early on in the piece on phone calls from the dead, and it's something that's always intrigued me because it takes me back to a time when I used to live in the UK when I was a kid, and there was a story from this local lady who she always used to take pride. She had this little cottage house with lots of flowers. I mean, it was beautiful, and she took so much pride in her garden, and she passed away in the house. Now, it got sold. The family sold it because they didn't want to be there with all the memories, obviously. And this young lady, she bought the place, and she was an avid gardener as well, so she kept the garden going. She loved the garden as much as the old lady that was there did. One night the phone started to ring, and she answered it, and it was just a lady saying, "I'm happy you're keeping the flowers going. She goes, the flowers are looking beautiful, the garden's looking beautiful. Thank you for taking care of it. And she didn't realise it was somebody that was dead because she actually sounded like she was talking to a living person through the phone. It was not crackly, it was clear as, and didn't think anything of it. And then she had another couple of these phone calls over the next couple of months, and she actually, even though she didn't know who it was, she said it was a lovely lady, and obviously an admirer that was walking past the garden and seeing them all. But then on another phone call, she actually turned around and said something about stuff inside the house, and she said, I'm glad to see that my old rocking chair is still there as well. And that creeped her out a little bit because obviously it was just her friends and family that had been in the house that knew it was still there. And then she started putting two and two together, and she actually was able to get in touch with the people that sold it, the family from the deceased lady. And they actually came over and played some video for her of their mum, grandmother, and whatever. And she said the voice was exactly the same. It was the old lady. Now, where this story gets much more deeply ingrained, and this is where I don't know if it's sort of urban legend in the town that I grew up in and everything, but she got this phone call again from the same lady, but the lady sounded a lot more distressed, not like she normally did. And she asked, she always played along because there was never any harm or anything happening from it. And this old lady on the phone said, whatever you do, do not open the door, do not answer the door. Somebody is coming and they are not good. And she was like, well, this is very weird. And it was only a few minutes after that there was a knock on the door. And she was like, do I answer it? Don't I answer it? She started to walk because she was going to have a look through the peephole. The phone rang again. And it was the old lady. Do not open the door. So she didn't open the door, but she had a look sort of through the corner of the curtains and stuff, and it was a man in a dark suit and he had a hood on. She couldn't make much more, but eventually this person took off, and it was about 2 or 3 days later that it made the news that there was a man. He was peeping Tom, and he broke into 2 houses and he raped the women. They both survived, but they were badly beaten. And this phone call from this lady that was praising her for keeping the flowers alive warned her. So she said, I am happy to take a phone call from this lady whenever she rings, because she's obviously got a good heart and she is happy with how things are going at the house. So that's like a happy haunting. I don't know if you're saying that the house is haunted or if it's just when you think about it, and obviously because we are paranormal investigators and we look at all of the facts behind everything. When you speak, everything is an electrical signal one way or the other. Why can't that energy pass through to a phone? Because a phone is only picking up electrical signals anyway. And even though this was an old analog phone, because this was way back, the old ring, spin the dial type phones. And that's what opened my mind to, well, if the right situation arises, people can get phone calls from the dead. And that was one of the stories that actually made me start researching the paranormal, because up to that point it was the UFOs that I was really interested in. And then, like I said, when I heard that story, that opened the world up to me, because I'm just so interested and hungry for knowledge on everything that is unknown in this world. And the paranormal and everything is it's a lifelong commitment, and it's a really good one.
Um, the way you said it, the story, the everything was so much better than the story.
I guess. I guess because when you were reading somebody else's story, you're not in the moment. But this is something that I lived through, and there's no written word on the screen or anything like that. This is just coming purely straight from my memory and my head, and that single story actually did shape my entire life. Now, I actually put the UFO down as my initiation into the paranormal, because when I tried to understand that, I went looking at the local libraries as a kid and getting some weird looks from people when I was asking for the books on the flying saucers and things like that, and all I had were these encyclopedias of the unexplained. There was no specific books on flying saucers or UFOs. So I would go through these books on the unexplained, and you'd find the chapter on UFOs and things like that, Area 51. Although Area 51 wasn't a big thing back then because Bob Lazar hadn't actually come out at that point. But they had things like spontaneous human combustion, Bigfoot, the Loch Ness Monster, which is obviously, I've been to Loch Ness, so that's close to my heart as well. And it just opened up. Growing up in England, the town that I grew up in was there in the 700s. It's over 1400 years old. So there's a lot of rich history, and as most paranormal investigators will say, there's a lot of possibility of spiritual activity and ghosts there. It's a very old land, whereas here in Australia, the whole country is only a couple of hundred years old. You know, it's only a little bit younger than America. So I lived that. I remember that. And it was interesting that it was like, oh, that's cool. You've got a ghost that's looking after the house. You know, it wasn't the big taboo thing back then because it just wasn't spoken about. And that's what I found so fascinating about it, is the fact that she spoke out in a local paper and it resonated with me and a lot of other people because there was a lot of talk about it. And she wasn't worried about it because she felt good that the lady who'd passed away in the house before her was happy with the way she was looking after it. You know, what do a lot of people do when you move into a house? I know we did when we moved in here. The first thing we did, repaint, redecorate, change the house, you know. Now, whatever she did, the old lady was happy. And the clutch of it all is that while people could make comment about the flowers and things out the front, who knew that rocking chair belonged to the old lady? Anybody that come in the house, you know, oh, there's a rocking chair there. They don't know the history of it.
Yeah.
So
And
I never
could say, how would anybody besides whoever been in the house know that rocking chair was still there?
Exactly. So the warm and fuzzy side is you've got an old lady that's still living in the house and she loves it. And she can see what's going on there because she can see the rocking chairs there. She can see the flowers and everything. The creepier side is when you have a little bit of private time, hopefully she's not still watching it. Oh, knitting needles, double speed.
But, you know, with your story, you know, with the warning, the open the door and stuff like this, you know, would that fall under guardian angel?
I think you could definitely put it that way, because when you say guardian angel, everybody thinks about angels with wings and things like that. I don't think it's specifically that. I think it's somebody who's got your best interests at heart, whether they be a
For
human
sure.
spirit or something else. You
100%.
Yeah.
100%. So a little personal story on myself. Back in 2002, 2003, I was in a very bad car accident. I should have died. I shouldn't be here today. I took, after the car accident, after, you know, the hospital, after the recovery, we had to go recover personal possessions from the vehicle. And it looked like my car was put in a disposable machine to crunch it up, because I was driving like a small little red Corolla. Is it 2-door small car? And the last thing I remember was a van's grill right next to my face. I was in and out of consciousness. I have a pretty funny story. Also, you got to find the positives where the negatives always appear. So there was no way I would have survived. And the police officers, the paramedics, the firefighters, everybody that was involved said that if there was anybody else in the car, they would have died instantly. Because the car literally looked like it was crunched in. But here's the thing. My seat, the driver's seat, untouched. Everything was just crushed in. My car actually flipped apparently 3-4 times. That's how hard I was hit. They had to use the what's it called, the jaws of life to remove the top of my car to get me out of the vehicle. But that goes to say that possibly I would say a year before that, a very close cousin of mine unfortunately took his own life, and people would say that he was the one that saved my life. Now, I was in a very bad spot during that time period. Here's another personal story of mine that very few knows about. In that same car, I was in a bad spot. So if I know a lot of people who listen to this are probably from Australia, but for those here in the States, especially those who know about New York, there is a bridge that goes from Brooklyn to Queens. It's called the BQE, Brooklyn Queens Expressway. There's a lot of turns on that bridge to get, and it's possibly depending on how fast you drive in traffic. Obviously, there's 30 to 40 minute drive. So I got into that same car, and it was possibly 1-2 o'clock in the morning. I got on the bridge, and there was nobody on it, and I put the pedal to the metal. I leaned my chair back. I wasn't seeing nothing. I was just waiting to crash. Explain to me how I got from Brooklyn to Queens in like 10 minutes and my car exited out of the highway.
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that one. I do have some very similar stories, and I'm probably going to save them for a different episode. But because obviously this being the Campfire Tales series, I think where we're going now, we're heading back into the mainstream podcast, and it's probably a good idea for maybe next week. And that's interesting, and that's personal stories. So yeah.
So, but it is still just like us, ain't it? Like we could start off with a thesis.
Yeah, we always start off with
and
something.
Then we just spread out. But anyway,
that's it. Anyway, I think everybody should enjoy the sounds of the campfire for a few more minutes, and we will say goodbye. So, take it easy, people.
Take it easy.